Hey team, Jen here. I am making this video today to talk to you a bit about how and when not to use author details in your analysis of texts. So I want to talk a little bit about when using authorial intent or author background, author biography can and cannot be a useful aspect of your writing in academia. So, in general, I think that many students, when they think about how to be critical about a piece of literature, they start with the author. And I think that this is a remnant of primary school education where teachers have been in the habit, the terrible habit, of beginning literature by talking about the author. So if you're going to be reading The Scarlet Letter, the teacher will begin by telling you background information about Nathaniel Hawthorne. This often functions because the end result that primary school teachers expect from their students is to write a book report. A book report is a very different genre than the academic genre. In a book report, your primary goal is to show your reader that you have read and that you have understood the text. Um, you often do this through summary and a very strong emphasis on author biography. So you want to show that you know who the author is, that you understand the time period that the author is writing in, and that you are understanding the text according to that criteria. That's the basic premise of a book report, is to show that you understand the text. You could talk about it. You understand the plot, you understand the characters, and you understand the author. As you know from watching my overview video, what is an academic essay, or what is the academic genre, you know that the academic genre is not a book report at all. So I want to talk a little bit about how do we address authorial issues in the academic genre. Well, the good answer, the best answer is you mostly don't, but sometimes you do. And I want to talk a little bit about when bringing in author details can be very relevant and very useful and when they're not. So beginning a piece of literature by understanding the author, it can be useful, especially if you are the kind of reader who really values that, who really values, who wrote this piece, where were they coming from? But I think it's a very dangerous thing to do, and I don't think that it's oftentimes as fruitful as it might be. When you come to a text trying to read for authorial intent, meaning that you want to know, why did Thomas Mann write the Metamorphosis? What was his motivation? I'm sorry, why did Kafka write the Metamorphosis? What was his motivation? Or why did Thomas Mann write Death in Venice? Was he gay? Was he married? What was his life like? If you ever come to a text with the intention of trying to understand why the author wrote the text, you are never going to get anywhere. There's absolutely zero chance that you're ever going to understand why Mann wrote the text, just as there's zero chance that Thomas Mann himself would ever understand why he wrote the text. A piece of literature ought not to always, or really hardly ever, be considered as part of the author's process because you're always guessing when it comes to authorial intent. You never know the reason that Mann wrote this or that. You can take a guess. Now, sometimes taking a guess, if you can provide a lot of context and a lot of evidence to support yourself, it can be worthwhile. For example, some critics out there make their life on trying to dissect Emily Dickinson's motivations for being a hermit and writing the kind of poetry that she did. And some of these critics do get somewhere. That kind of analysis can be fruitful if you have done the kind of meticulous primary research where you're going to really make your life out of, understanding who Emily Dickinson was, why she was the way that she was, then you actually might develop some credibility toward using authorial intent. But anytime that you use authorial intent in an essay, you always have to connect that analysis to your textual analysis. For example, you never want to have authorial background, authorial intent separate from your reading of the text, your close reading, your analysis, your argumentation. So, for example, if you have a paragraph where you just talk about who Thomas Mann was, who Kafka was, who Camus was, and these things are not shown to be integral for how we ought to read the text, then it's not functional. It's not working toward anything but to show that you know the author in a very kind of third person removed kind of way. That doesn't function. Whenever you bring up any details of the author, these details must be shown to be pivotal in your line of inquiry. So they has to be functional in terms of helping you develop your argument or offering evidence for a particular perspective that you take of the text. It has to be a fundamental part for how you understand a passage in close reading, or how we ought to analyze the text through, whatever, a cultural lens or a sexual lens or a national lens or whatever. It has to be functional. Otherwise, bringing in authorial details doesn't have a function. I hope that is clear. I think a lot of students don't know where to begin when it comes to analyzing and close reading a text. I mean, how important is the author? Is the author important at all? I mean, criticism began by valuing the author more than any other thing about the text. That was actually before the dawn of what we call now literary criticism. Before literary criticism came to be a trend in academia, in the humanities, people would start by, talking about the author. What did Nathaniel Hawthorne intend when he wrote Scarlet Letter? Then in the 1970s, literary criticism was born with something called the New Criticism. New criticism wanted to look at context and really didn't want to regard the authorial intention with a lot of value because it's something very unknown. And from new criticism, all the literary theory that we know today was born. So keep in mind that when you bring up authorial intent, which is also called the intentional fallacy, when you bring in author biography or author background, you want to keep in mind that it is an extremely antiquated way to approach text because it's not found as being very fruitful, reliable, critical, interesting, argumentative. But on the other hand, it does have its place in academia if it is functional. So please keep in mind whenever you bring up an author, more than just to say this is, I'll be, talking about Gabriel Garcia Marquez's Love in the Time of Cholera. If you're going beyond that in any way by providing some details, you better make sure that those details are necessary and clearly connected to your line of inquiry. That's all I had to say today. Bye for now.